Hello, Fiedelbogen here. To my fellow workers in the vineyard worldwide, greetings. The title of today's talk is Accelerating the Death of Bad Ideas. There is a school of thought in pro-male cyberspace which says, keep it apolitical. What do they mean by this? Well, they mean that pro-male partisans should generally avoid established categories of political discourse, such as right versus left, and stay away from extraneous matters which do not clearly pertain to feminism, men's issues, and the like. There is also a school of thoughtlessness in pro-male cyberspace, which flaps its gums about all manner of things, and that is just for starters. For when those same thoughtless ones voice wildly indiscreet opinions upon their topics of choice, it greatly compounds the original difficulty. Clearly, these two schools are at odds with one another, but the apolitical ones are on the right track. You see, for them, the point at issue is message discipline. That's mainly what they're worried about. And message discipline is vital if you would craft a so-called movement, political or otherwise, that draws upon topical issues as a rallying point. For if you aim to gather followers and gain traction, you must stick to a relevant set of talking points and govern your tongue when you speak of these things. That said, I would submit that the so-called men's movement is nothing of the kind. It is no movement, but merely a group of people, largely male, who are talking loudly about a variety of things. And all of their loud talk is like an orchestra with no conductor, where the musicians are out of tune with each other and playing different tunes anyway. The general public, walking outside the orchestra hall, hears only a frightful racket from within. The bigoted bassoonist, the anti-Semitic saxophonist, the conservative clarinetist, the anti-feminist flugelhorn player, the PUA piccolo player, and so on. It all runs together into a dreadful audio slurry, and so the general public draws its varied conclusions about that sum total of weird noise, and those conclusions are often unfavorable. The general public, you see, deals in generalities, so it doesn't generally know what the hell is going on. Some of them may enter the building and wander around and talk to the musicians separately and begin to form a more educated understanding. Yes, many of them do this to varying degrees, but many others never investigate further than the sidewalk and what they can hear from there. Very well. The men's movement, as it is loosely called, is no movement at all, but simply a lot of random motion. And such words as MRA and MRM are only ad hoc terminology, figures of speech, convenience words, and people persist in using these words because they are, well, convenient. They simplify discussion, and they even render discussion possible in the first place. And that's pretty hard to beat, wouldn't you say? But these words also falsify the state of reality, and our enemies, the feminists, capitalize on this. All they must do is fan the flames of doubt and distaste in the public mind. This, precisely, has been the feminist strategy, a smear job, moral ghettoization, a guilt by proximity. Briefly then, whoever simply talks against feminism will be called an MRA or a member of the MRM. Now, there is nothing wrong with talking against feminism, nothing whatsoever. In fact, Talking against feminism is one of the finest things a person can do. It is a noble endeavor. Feminism, you see, is a social cancer, and talking against it is part of the necessary process that will conduct toward the eventual liquidation of it. So, yes, by all means, talk against feminism. By the way, when you merely criticize feminism from within feminism, that is not talking against feminism. Talking against feminism means talking against it from an alien standpoint, completely outside of its borders. All hail anti-feminism. But the trouble is that whoever simply talks against feminism gets shoved into the same box willy-nilly with, PUAs, expatriate pussy hunters, conspiracy theorists, racists, anti-government radicals, Tea Partiers, bona fide misogynists, and a whole lot of other people. I mean, people whose philosophical Venn diagrams might overlap yours by a narrow slice at most. Admittedly, the inherent goodness or badness of their ideas will vary. It is not my point to discuss inherent goodness or badness. My point is that, like it or not, the words MRA and MRM have been jammed into the same jar with the motley crew listed above, even if there is no inherent reason why they should be. And so, if you identify as an MRA, or even just get identified as one, then you will go there too. Once more, to get commonly identified as an MRA or as an MRM person, all you must do is to talk against feminism. That's it. After that, public ignorance combined with feminist propaganda will do the rest. And presto changeo, you are now a PUA or a Tea Party member, even if you never remotely signed up for the likes of those. Again, let's be clear that talking against feminism is a good thing. The point is that you can do this either well or poorly in terms of political strategies. And some people do it very poorly indeed. But enough of the bad stuff. Now let's talk about sunbeams and silver linings. I mentioned that the MRM is not a movement. Now that is a silver lining. So, what then is the so-called men's rights movement, if not a movement? Get ready. It is a microcosm of the human race. In other words, it is the world. And so, it is not accountable for itself any more than the world is accountable for itself. The world is simply the ecumenical human condition with all of its lights and shadows in toto. And the ecumenical human condition simply is what it is. We are all part of that ecumenical human condition, but as individuals, our liability is limited. Feminism, on the other hand, may be usefully defined as a movement, and for that reason can be held accountable as a movement. It is a part of the world, but it is not the world, even though it pretends to be. No, feminism is merely an interpretation of what the world is, forced upon the world in defiance of what the world in fact is. Alternately stated, feminism is a violation of the natural order and the laws which compose that order. Therefore, every natural law or principle which feminist theory violates becomes our enlisted ally against the feminist regime itself. And so the character of our revolution is not just demographic or political, it is radically primordial. Yes, that is us. We are the world, nay, the universe, and we are radically primordial. In retrospect, we can see that this had to happen. It was predictable. There was a point beyond which feminist innovation could not push without the universe pushing back. And let me tell you, pushback from the universe can be a bitch. So, the MRM is not a movement as that word is generally understood, but a primordial pushback against feminism. And this involves a chaotic array of forces that can never be reduced to conventional categories of understanding. New categories are necessary. Rather than calling the MRM a movement, singular, we should call it a complex of movements, plural, which are now in process of formation. But as a whole, it lacks the structural unity that would subject it to accountability. As I've stated, it is a microcosm of the world, and is no more accountable for itself than the world is accountable for itself. The feminist smear tricks are not working because our numbers worldwide continue to swell. Every slander campaign against us only helps us by giving us publicity. People drop by for a closer look, and plenty of them stick around, and then they pass the word along to their friends. So the microcosm is growing and merging with the macrocosm. The so-called MRM, you see, merely represents that portion of the non-feminist sector which has become politically aware of itself. And the size of that self-aware portion increases on a snowballing growth curve. In light of all this, I return to an earlier question. What does it mean, and what could it mean, to keep things apolitical? For in fact, this thing of ours has never been truly apolitical, and never will be. Seriously, what do we understand by the word political? Does politics mean the struggle for power, influence, and self-determination? All right, then how has our project ever been anything but political? It has been, I submit, political indeed, for it has always focused on power and the accumulation of it by one device or another. Yes, that is what I call politics. When people talk about keeping the so-called MRM apolitical, what they're doing is they're voicing a fear lest it be caught up in established categories of power struggle, eventually being co-opted and rendered worthless for its original purpose. This is more commonly expressed, as I myself have done, by saying that the movement will pick up counterproductive baggage and sink beneath the weight of it. Well, in a strange way, the good news becomes the bad news, and then the bad news immediately becomes the good again. The original good news is that our numbers keep growing. Then the bad news is that in return for the numbers, we are taking undisciplined people and their counterproductive baggage on board. And yet, directly from this bad news, the original good news springs to life once more. Namely, that despite such inconveniences, and indeed because of them, our numbers continue to swell. So the good and bad news feed upon each other like yin and yang. The lesson we draw from this is that all sorts of people want to be liberated from feminism. Some of these are good people, some of these are bad people, some of them are merely indifferent people, but they want to be liberated from feminism, and they are worthy of getting what they want. Yes, every goddamned blessed one of them. They needn't do one single precious thing in all the world to earn this or deserve this. All people deserve to be liberated from feminism. Even the worst misogynist or rapist who ever lived deserves to be liberated from feminism. The whole wide world deserves to be liberated from feminism. All people should, ideally, get the justice they deserve for their misdeeds, but they should not get that justice under color of feminism. They should get the justice they deserve under color of something else, some other system of law or morality, but not under color of feminism. One more time, the whole wide world deserves to be liberated from feminism. And you know what? The whole wide world will wake up to this and demand it. Feminism is a worldview slated for extinction. Etch that upon your brain. So, it is silly to fuss about the ideological purity of any so-called men's movement because the whole wide world is coming on board and there is simply no way that the whole wide world can be ideologically pure. Therefore, if some feminist wants to slander the so-called men's movement, you have only to demand, which men's movement? And then demand to be left in peace. Because there is no such thing as this men's movement, so it is up to you to create it for yourself. There are 10, 20, 40, 100 different men's movements, and when you start your own, that will bring the total to 101. What's that? You don't like the baggage that certain people are lugging on board? Fine. Pack your own bags onto your own wagon and go your own road. With the growth of our numbers, we need no longer cling for dear life to any possible traveling companion. We can afford to be choosy. Understand that every philosophy or life system which grows beyond a certain mass will fractionate into schisms, and those schisms into schisms. And the reason is simple. It is because the system naturally pulls in more and more of the world's variety as it grows numerically. It cannot possibly do otherwise, because the world is never monolithic. But this is a good thing. It is a source of strength and a cause for celebration. To us, it means that our enemy can no longer smear us, because you can't smear something which is spread all over the landscape in the first place, can you? With our growing numbers and our variety of schisms, we are out of the box and we are everywhere, like a wraparound environment. It is impossible to shake a stick at us anymore because you can't shake a stick in all directions at once. So by reason of our ambient character, we are, or soon will be, in a position to define the cultural ambiance and even control the discourse. The pro-male project, as we have known it, is the germinating bud of something larger called the non-feminist revolution. Feminism's war against the world started with the war against men, but that war quickly spread because it was impossible to contain it. So the non-feminist revolution has developed in the same sequence as feminist aggression itself, starting with sensitive males, let us say, who understand best of all what is happening, and then spreading to larger circles and pulling in growing numbers of women, along with growing numbers of men. The recent growth of anti-feminist feeling on the political left signals a tectonic change in the political landscape. It signals that feminism's intellectual reign of terror is weakening among that cohort, and the implications of such a development are perilous for feminism's power base. But this development, like so much else, was a predictable thing that had to happen, and in the context of primordial pushback, it couldn't possibly not have happened. Very well, disciplined work lies ahead, but I can see that the field of opportunity is wide open. Fiedelbogen, out. Track. You see, for them, the point at issue is message discipline, That's mainly what they're worried about. And message discipline is vital if you would craft a so-called movement, political or otherwise, that draws upon topical issues as a rallying point. For if you aim to gather followers and gain traction, you must stick to a relevant set of talking points and govern your tongue when you speak of these things. That said, I would submit that the so-called men's movement is nothing of the kind. It is no movement, but merely a group of people, largely male, who are talking loudly about a variety of things. And all of their loud talk is like an orchestra with no... What do they mean by this? Well, they mean that pro-male partisans should generally avoid established categories of political discourse, such as right versus left, and stay away from extraneous matters which do not clearly pertain to feminism, men's issues, and the like. There is also a school of thoughtlessness in pro-male cyberspace, which flaps its gums about all manner of things, and that is just for starters. For when those same thoughtless ones voice wildly indiscreet opinions upon their topics of choice, it greatly compounds the original difficulty. Clearly, these two schools are at odds with one another, but the apolitical ones are on the right. Hello, Fiedelbogen here. To my fellow workers in the vineyard worldwide, greetings. The title of today's talk is Accelerating the Death of Bad Ideas. There is a school of thought in pro-male cyberspace which says, keep it apolitical.